guys, this is Senti Reads, and as you can see by the title, today we're covering a very exciting Halloween Goosebumps special. I specifically looked for a Goosebumps book that took place on Halloween, and there are surprisingly few. I think there's only 4 or 5, one of which is The Haunted Mask. However, that's super famous and well-regarded, so I didn't want to cover that one. Today's book is Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. It is the 48th book in the original series and was published in 1996, and although it is one of the original books, I really don't think R.L. Stine wrote this one, but we'll get into that later. Let's take a look at the cover. And although I didn't recognize this cover, I do believe I've read this one before. Some of the events seemed pretty familiar when I read them. And I happen to really like this cover. There's something sort of ominous about the jack-o'-lanterns with their big wide smiles and the spooky woods behind them. It's super cool. And I especially like the jack-o'-lantern dog. He's so spooky, he's fun. I just really like this cover. Let's jump right into the blurb. Pumpkin power! Nothing beats Halloween. It's Drew Brockman's favorite holiday. And this year will be awesome. Much better than last year. Or the year Lee and Tabby played that joke. A nasty practical joke on Drew and her best friend Walker. Yes, this year Drew and Walker have a plan. A plan for revenge. It involves 2 scary pumpkin heads. But something's gone wrong. Way wrong. Because the pumpkin heads are a little too scary. A little too real. With strange hissing voices and flames shooting out of their faces. Drew is a girl, by the way, in case you missed that in the description. There's surprisingly no mention of a sibling, which was refreshing after my complaints from the previous books. And having read this book, there are no siblings, so thank God we finally got a different family dynamic. Let's get right into Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Where are you going, Elf? Dad called from the den. Don't call me Elf, I shouted back. My name is Drew. Dad thinks it's real cute to call me Elf, but I hate it. He calls me Elf because I'm tiny for a 12-year-old, and I have short, straight black hair and sort of a pointy chin and a pointy little nose. If you looked like an elf, would you want people calling you Elf? Of course not. I don't really like it when books open on dialogue, but this exchange was surprisingly cute. Or cringe? I can't really tell. I don't know if I like this or not, but it at least has some personality, which is nice. And this sets up Drew as the classic Chihuahua character, and by that I mean the type that is tiny and angry, usually about their own tininess. Like, think about Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. That is a classic Chihuahua character.
Don't call me little!
I'm tough. Ask anyone. They'll tell you that Drew Brockman is tough. When you're the shrimpiest girl in your class, you've got to be tough. This is the moment I knew R.L. Stine definitely didn't write this. The main character has way too much of a unique voice, albeit an annoying one. It gets worse. You've seen nothing yet. She's so annoying. But this character has a lot of personality and a lot of charm, and that's not something R.L. Stine is known to write. I'm sorry, R.L. Stine, you're my dude, you're my boy, but your characters are bland. Anyway, Drew says she's waiting for her friends to come to her house. They're meeting to plan revenge on 2 of their classmates, Tabby and Lee, who have ruined Halloween for the past 2 years in ways we'll find out later. I'm so angry about it. Walker is angry too. Our favorite holiday ruined because of 2 stuck-up kids who think they can do whatever they want. Grrr. Just thinking about it makes me want to punch someone. Here comes that Chihuahua rage! Drew literally growls when she's angry, and this is far from the first time she does it. I can't possibly mention every time she does it. She probably does it like 10 times throughout the book. It'll just say grrr when she's mad, which is hilarious, because she's like that TikTok wolf girl. It's funny. It's annoying, but it's funny. Eventually, all of Drew's friends show up. We have Walker, who's just a regular dude, and then the creepy twins, Shayna and Shane, or Shauna and Shane. Either way, it's hard to say. I'll probably just refer to them as the twins because they're basically the same person anyway. They're described as having curly blonde ringlets and being short and chunky. So that means they're basically cherubs, which is oddly terrifying. It's a weird image. I don't like that. We jump into a flashback 2 years ago to the first Halloween that Lee and Tabby ruined. Drew says they were all 10 years old at the time, meaning they're 12 in the current timeline, and this is important for later. Before we get into what happened, we learned that the town is called Riverdale, which I found hilarious. This was written in 1996. Well, I guess Archie comics were out by then, but the weird, edgy CW Riverdale was not. We also get some description of Tabby and Lee. Tabby is a beautiful green-eyed blonde who's repeatedly described as perfect. Lee is described as being good-looking with brown skin. In the trivia section on the wiki, it says that his description was changed multiple times with each re-release of the book. Apparently the first version compared him to an MTV rapper, which is sort of yikes. And the second version explicitly called him African-American. I don't know why they had to change that to brown skin for this version. I didn't think there was anything offensive about African American. Please educate me if I am wrong. However, that MTV rapper shit, ooh, that is cringe. Lee apparently always has a mouthful of gum, which makes him impossible to understand, which is a little detail that I thought was funny. We get a "my dad works at Nintendo" moment from Lee when he sees Walker's 12-speed bike and claims that he has a specially made 42-speed bike at home, and of course he offers no proof. I just thought this was funny. It means nothing to the plot. Drew doesn't like all this teasing, and of course she growls about it. "Grr, I couldn't help it. I balled my hands into fists and let out an angry growl. I growl a lot. Sometimes I don't even know I'm doing it." This is definitely a wolf girl moment. We all knew that wolf girl. That is her. That is Drew. And I'm probably not going to mention it ever again when she growls because it's going to get redundant, but she does it like 10 more times. Lee ends up inviting Drew and Walker to his Halloween party for some inexplicable reason. They're not particularly cool, so I don't know why he did that. And the next chapter immediately skips to the party. Tabby is dressed as a beautiful princess, because of course she is, and we get this hilarious interaction between her and Drew, which was another big red flag that R.L. Stine did not write this. She smiled her lipstick lips at me. "Is that you, Drew?" she asked, pretending she didn't recognize me. "What are you supposed to be? A mouse?" "No," I protested. "I'm not a mouse. I'm a Klingon. Don't you ever watch Star Trek?" Tabby snickered. "Are you sure you're not a mouse?" She turned and walked away. She had a pleased smile on her face. She gets such a thrill from insulting me. These costumes are genuinely hilarious to me, which I don't know that R.L. Stine really ever makes pop culture references when he was writing, so that's why I don't think he wrote this. Drew is a Klingon, which is a funny mental image because they kind of have that fucked up forehead, and the twins are dressed like snowmen. Their costumes are these huge hunks of styrofoam, and they can barely move around in them. Walker is dressed like a mummy, and his bandages keep on rolling, so essentially we have like the geek squad here at this party. But the party's going fine until they hear thumping from the basement, and that's when Lee announces that somebody must have broken in, which is weird to me because most basements I've been in only have like the one entrance that connects directly to the house. I mean, some basements have external doors, but most don't from what I've seen. So it's weird that he would immediately assume that somebody broke in. Lee tries to call the police, but says the line is dead. And that's when two actual intruders in ski masks come up from the basement. Remember that this is a party of 10-year-olds. This is genuinely traumatic. And I forgot to mention that Lee is dressed like Batman, which is about to be relevant. "Who are you?" Lee demanded over the frightened cries of some kids. "How did you get in? Where are my parents?" "Parents?" the guy in the ski mask replied. He had bright blue eyes, almost as blue as the wool mask that covered his face. "Do you have parents?" Damn! This joke really caught me off guard because he's Batman, his parents are dead. And the writing of this book is really clever and has a lot of personality, as I said before. And I hate to say it, but I really don't think R.L. Stine wrote this one. He obviously has jokes in his other books, but they're not as clever as this. I really think somebody else wrote this. The intruders demand that the kids get on the floor. Shane and Shayna, the twins, can't really do it because of their big-ass snowman costumes, so they end up destroying the costumes to be able to get on the floor to follow the orders. The kids, the rest of the kids in the room, are then ordered to do push-ups for hours, and they start doing the push-ups when Drew looks over and sees Tabby and Lee talking to the intruders, and that's when she realizes they're not intruders, but they're two older kids from the high school. And I just want to know what two high schoolers are doing with 10-year-olds. Like, that is weird. I have no idea how these 10-year-olds even know these teenagers. FBI, open up! And it turns out it was all a prank, and a very sadistic one at that, because these kids were like genuinely in fear of their lives, and it said later in the book that the kids literally have PTSD from this night. That was too mean and too frightening. Some of my friends still have bad dreams about guys in ski masks and gorilla masks. Apparently they were in gorilla masks. I guess I forgot that detail. We're told that Tabby and Lee ruined 2 Halloweens, so then we skip to the next Halloween. Drew decides to hold a party at her house so they can get back at Lee and Tabby, and this subplot takes entirely too long as they painstakingly discuss their decorations and their plans to try to scare Tabby and Lee. It goes on for pages and pages, and at one point they discuss dropping slime on them, but decide against it because it's not really scary, it would just ruin their costumes. "What is that?" I shrieked. Everyone turned and saw what I saw. A huge ugly hole in one of the brown leather couch cushions. "Oh no," Shayna wailed. "I was playing with a ball of green slime. I must have dropped it onto the couch when I stood up. It burned a hole in the cushion." Jesus Christ! I guess it's a good idea they ditched that slime idea. I mean, terrifying kids with intruders is one thing, but melting their faces off is another thing entirely. How did they get this weird slime that burns holes through things? What is going on? You could apparently get some really crazy children's toys back in 1996 if the slime would burn holes in things. This detail is so minor, but I cannot let this go. Eventually, the friend group decide on some kind of plan they're going to do. They're going to scare them, act like ghosts. It doesn't matter because Tabby and Lee call and cancel, and that's it. They're not going to go to the party, And it was super anticlimactic for all the buildup we got of their party plans. Like, I'm serious. There was pages and pages of them planning this party, and then it didn't even happen. They just called and canceled. And this second ruined Halloween didn't even need to exist because the first one with the intruders is way more than enough reason for revenge. I don't even understand why this sequence of scenes even had to happen. I feel like they included this all to just pad out the word count. Anyway, now we skip forward to the present timeline. Somehow Lee and Tabby agree to go trick-or-treating with the Dork Squad, and I have no idea how they would even convince them to do that because there's no way they would be seen in public with them. Because Tabby and Lee are kind of popular, so I don't understand why this is happening. Anyway, they're going out trick-or-treating. Tabby is a space princess, which means she recycled her previous princess costume but painted her face green. Lee is Superman, and Walker and Drew are dressed like ghosts. They're in bed sheets, which is sort of clan-like, and I wonder why they didn't change that in the updated versions. They could have just gave them a different costume. I could just be reading into it. It's just weird they didn't change that. Anyway, the twins aren't there, but Drew says they'll catch up with them later. They trick-or-treat for a little while before hitting one last house at the end of the street. It's kind of a sketchy house. The old lady who answers the door really likes their costumes and invites them inside. And these dumbass kids just go inside her house and follow her all the way to the back room where she says, I think she says her husband is back there and he wants to see the costumes, which, like, no thank you. She opened the door and let us enter. To my surprise, the back room was enormous and jammed with kids in costumes. Whoa, I cried out, startled. My eyes quickly swept the room. Most of the kids had taken off their masks. Some of them were crying. Some were red-faced and angry. Several kids sat cross-legged on the floor, their expressions glum.
What? What the fuck?
Jesus! This is another really traumatizing situation. She's just, like, locking random kids off the street in this room. That was my daydream. I was down by the street in front of my house, waiting for my friends to show up, and daydreaming about Tabby and Lee being trapped by a weird old couple who liked to collect trick-or-treaters and keep them forever. Of course, in my daydream, Walker and I sneaked out a side door, but Tabby and Lee were caught before they could escape, and they were never seen again. Nice daydream, huh?
What? What the fuck?
God fucking damn it. We're really gonna go with this whole imagination fake-out thing again? Again? None of this, this took pages for this to happen. Multiple pages to get, only for it to end up in a fake-out. I can't even form words, I'm so mad. Maybe R.L. Stine really did write this shit after all. All of that stuff was just a daydream, and as I said, it took pages to cover that, just further padding out the word count. We cut back to Drew and Walker, like current day, actual, real time, trying to plan how to get revenge on Tabby and Lee this Halloween. And this gave me some serious whiplash because the timeline was so weird. I couldn't figure out, are we actually in current time or what is going on? It is current time. The twins come up with a plan and tell the others off the page, so they all know what's going on, but the reader doesn't, and you'll never guess what it is. It's got to be the craziest thing I've ever read in a Goosebumps book thus far, but I'm getting ahead of myself and sort of spoiling the action. The group decide to go trick-or-treating after all, which makes the multi-page fake-out even more maddening, because they're just about to redo what they just did, and that's when Drew's mom comes in and says they can't go trick-or-treating because people are going missing. She specifically says that 4 people have gone missing, none of which are children. They're actually all adults, specifically very tall adults, like 6'6" and taller. And I thought this height distinction was really strange, but that's actually because this is another thing that was changed from the original version. In the original version, it was actually big fat people that went missing. Like, not double chin fat, but the book actually wrote, like, that they had 6 chins, that kind of fat, which is super yikes that they would specifically target fat people. It's weird. I understand why they changed it, but the tall people thing is also weird. This whole thing is weird. You'll find out the deal later. The kids insist that they should be allowed to go trick-or-treating anyway, because it's not like kids are going missing. It's only big, tall adults, and they're 12-year-olds, so they're not the target. And Mom firmly says no, because she's smart. And the tension is killed immediately, because the first line of the very next chapter is Drew saying that her dad said they could go trick-or-treating anyway. So they tried to put this build up that they're not going to get to go, only to literally in the first line of the next chapter say they're going to go anyway. Drew goes over to Lee's house to ask him and Tabby to go trick-or-treating with their group. Lee is trying on his costume, which happens to be a hilariously described bee costume. There is absolutely nothing cool about it at all, which is hilarious given how many times the narrative describes him as being cool. Tabby is going as a ballerina because she still gets to wear a tiara and it's basically another princess. The moment passes and Drew asks them straight up if they want to go trick-or-treating with her group, and they say yes, like straight away without any questions or anything. And the narrative made it seem like Drew was going to have to convince them to go, But that didn't happen at all. She just asked and they said yes. And I don't understand why they didn't already have plans. They're really cool. They have a lot of friends. What are they doing hanging out with the Geek Squad? It makes no sense. Finally, Halloween comes. Drew is dressed like a superhero and Walker shows up in all black. Yet again, the trivia section said that this was changed as well. He was actually wearing black face paint as well, but they cut those references out because of the potential implications of blackface, which is super yikes. It's not really a good sign that this book had to remove so much. Like, I know 1996 was a really different time, but I don't know if I'm vibing with that. We get this really witty description of Walker's costume, which definitely shows that R.L. Stine did not write this. Dad stared at Walker's all-black costume. "What are you supposed to be?" he asked. "A dark and stormy night," Walker replied. "Huh? Where's the stormy part?" I asked. "Here," Walker replied. He raised a black water pistol and squirted me in the face. This made me laugh out loud. Like, genuinely, I laughed when I read this because I'm not used to so much cleverness from a Goosebumps book. They just keep coming with these witty one-liners that crack me up every time. Drew and Walker meet up with Tabby and Lee, and yet again, like the daydream, they say the twins will meet them later, and that daydream thing just keeps making me angrier. They start to head out for trick-or-treating when Drew is literally tackled to the ground by some kind of creature, and it turns out it's just one of the high school kids from earlier being the creepiest guy alive. What kind of high schooler? Well, actually, no. This is 2 years. Well, I guess they could still be a high schooler at this point, just an older high schooler, which is even weirder. What kind of high schooler tackles a 12-year-old to the ground and bites them on the neck? Like, that she was attacked. He bit her on the neck. Like, what the fuck was up with that? I really could have done without that scene. FBI, open up! Especially because the high school kids never appear again in the story. So it makes that uncomfortable moment feel especially useless and gross and weird. I really didn't like that. Anyway, they sort of just like shrug off what happened to them and go trick-or-treating anyway. The twins are late to meet them, which makes Drew worried that their plan is going to fail. But they continue trick-or-treating anyway until they come across a pair of strange figures. In a gray blur, the two figures turned their backs on us, blocking our way. They wore dark robes that flowed straight down to the ground, and over their heads they wore pumpkins. Large, round pumpkins perfectly balanced on their shoulders. As they slowly turned to face us, their jack-o'-lantern faces came into view. Eerie, jagged grins cut into their pumpkin heads. Flashing triangle eyes, lit by flames. Bright orange and yellow flames danced inside their heads. So these must be the titular jack-o'-lanterns that will eventually do some attacking. And they definitely can't be people in masks because of the actual flames in their heads. So we know straight away there is something supernatural going on here, even though we don't know what yet. Tabby and Lee immediately laugh it off and say they know it's Shanna and Shane, that is so hard to say, and the costumes. Drew is freaked out by how good the costumes are and wonders why the two aren't afraid of them. And she knew the twins were going to come up with something good, but she wasn't expecting something this good. And it's honestly weird that they just kind of push aside the fact that there are flames coming out of their head. Like, obviously somebody can't do that. There's something going on here, but kids are stupid. The group carry on trick-or-treating despite Drew's reservations about the jack-o'-lantern people. And they aren't really talking much until one of them says this. "Let's go somewhere," the jack-o'-lantern said from somewhere inside the pumpkin head. His voice came out in a hoarse crackle, too harsh to be a whisper, a dry, choked sound. Somewhere else, his partner echoed. Her voice also came out in a hoarse crackle, like dry, dead leaves being crinkled together. I was genuinely surprised by the quality of the writing here. I really liked the description here of the voice sounding like dry leaves, and it was just good. I liked this. Lee and Tabby laugh off what they think is yet another attempt to scare them as they follow the jack-o'-lantern people into the woods to go to wherever this neighborhood is. And Walker sort of pulls Drew aside and asks her what's going on. He says that the twins aren't following the plan anymore. Drew sort of shrugs and they just go along anyway with the pumpkin people. They eventually make it to the new neighborhood where there are tons of houses packed in close, making it the ultimate place to trick-or-treat just because of the absolute density of these houses. And Drew randomly worries about the missing people. Like, don't forget about it, the people are going missing. But she quickly forgets about it as they start filling their bags with candy. They trick-or-treat for a while before everyone starts to get tired, and they want to stop and go home. It's getting late, but the jack-o'-lantern people insist that they continue. The kids are dead set about going home, so the jack-o'-lantern people block them from leaving, and in the struggle, one of their pumpkin heads comes off. They pulled the fiery pumpkin heads off the creature's shoulders. And then all four of us screamed because the two costume figures had no heads underneath. I bet you guys couldn't see that coming. There's definitely something supernatural going on here if that wasn't obvious already by the literal flames shooting out of their heads. So obviously these are not the twins because they can't remove their heads. So Drew dramatically declares that the pumpkin people aren't the twins, as if that wasn't obvious already. And the kids make a run for it, but the jack-o'-lantern people fly around them, like literally fly in the air and trap them in a swirl of flames. And they say the kids have to trick-or-treat forever. Given no other options, the kids decide to comply and they get right back to it. They try to ask people for help, but nobody believes their situation. Like, as they go up to the door, they're like begging for help, and obviously people think they're pranking them, so nobody's helping them. And eventually their bags are completely full with candy, so they have to stop trick-or-treating for now. "We have to go home," Tabby cried. "Our bags are totally full." "That's no problem," one of the pumpkin heads replied. "No problem," Tabby wailed. "No problem?" "Start eating," the pumpkin head ordered. "Huh?" we all gasped. "Start eating," he insisted. "Start eating." We then get an absolutely disgusting scene of the kids choking and gagging on their candy as they struggle to make room in their bags. Like, they're on the verge of throwing up. It's horrifying. Like, it's really a nasty, kind of creepy, scary scene. And it's sort of implied that the jack-o'-lanterns will burn them to death with their flames if they don't comply. Like, Jesus Christ, this book is dark. Like, they're swirling around them with the fire, and they're like, "You have to do it." So I guess they're going to do it. The kids clear some room in their bags, and they're forced to continue trick-or-treating. But now all of the people in the houses are also jack-o'-lantern people. So I don't know when that switch happened, but now everybody's a jack-o'-lantern person, and this is a weird, creepy neighborhood. Their situation is starting to look really dire. They're going to have to walk until their bags are full, gorge and make themselves sick on candy, and continue that for eternity. Halloween doesn't sound so fun anymore. Eventually, the kids get so tired that they decide to stop walking and just accept their fate, which is crazy to me that they're just like, "Yeah, we'll just burn to death. We're done with this." Okay. The pumpkin heads get really mad about this, and they start screaming. And then their mouths stretched even wider, and they both let out high wails. The shrill sound rose and fell through the heavy night air, rose and fell like police sirens. The pumpkin heads tilted back until their flames shot straight up to the sky, and their siren wails grew louder, louder, until I had to hold my hands over my ears. Am I just a wimp, or was that actually kind of scary? I'm really enjoying how the book describes things. It really does get a spooky atmosphere going on. I have a lot of complaints about this book, but the actual quality of the prose is pretty good. The screams end up summoning the other jack-o'-lantern people, and dozens of them exit the houses around them and surround the kids. They have jack-o'-lanterns in their hands to put on the kids' heads, and everyone is terrified. Nobody wants to become a jack-o'-lantern person. Nobody really knows what's going to happen to them. Tabby and Lee try to get away to no avail, and they have the pumpkins shoved on their heads all dramatically. And now it's Walker and Drew's turn. They're about to get the pumpkins on their head, but they burst out laughing. Weird, huh? Remember that there was a plan in place this whole time? One that Drew and the others knew, but the reader didn't? Yeah, that's what's happening. This is the plan. We get the most insane, out-of-pocket plot twist I have ever read. I stepped up to Shane and Shanna and hugged them both. "Of course," I exclaimed. "It helps to have two aliens from another planet as friends."
What? What the fuck?
What the actual fuck? What? They're aliens? They're actually aliens. This is not a fake out. They are for real aliens. And there was exactly zero foreshadowing for this reveal, which makes it even more baffling. I literally had to put the book down for a few minutes and take a break when I read this line because I was so confused. They explained that they didn't previously use Shane and Shanna's powers, like their weird alien powers, whatever. I don't even know what they're I don't even know what they're capable of doing with their weird powers. It's really not explained. Apparently they're like shapeshifters and they can fly and they can shoot flames. I don't know. They explained that they never used their powers to get revenge before because they didn't want to get outed as aliens. But this year they were really desperate. So they concocted this whole scheme. Apparently scaring some kids was enough to get a ton of other aliens to help them out with their weird plan because all of those other Pumpkinhead people are fellow aliens. Like, how many aliens are there? Do they also live on Earth? Do they live in a spaceship and just like showed up to do this random prank? And they even said that they like took over an existing neighborhood. So like, what did they do with the homeowners? Did they hold them captive? Like, what is going on? I'm so confused. This completely tore the plot apart because the narrative is told from Drew's perspective, like first person perspective. And she seemed genuinely scared through what was happening over the course of the book. She was very scared of the pumpkin people. And remember that time that Walker pulled her aside to say that they were deviating from the plan? Well, clearly they weren't. Clearly this was exactly the plan and it went on without a hitch. And there was no reason for Walker to say that because Tabby and whatever his name is, Tabby and Lee weren't even around to hear him say that, so it was only written to throw the reader off, which doesn't make sense because Drew knew this was the plan, Walker knew this was the plan, clearly nothing went wrong, so I don't understand what is going on here. This type of plot twist just does not work for a first-person narrative because Drew is in on the plan, so she would not have been scared throughout any of these events. Sure, she would have pretended to be scared, but in her narration, she would show that she was not actually scared. Rant aside, remember that there were some people who went missing? Shayna reached out and pinched my arm. You're still really bony, Drew, she replied. You'll find out what Shane and I eat when you fill out a bit. Yeah, Shane chimed in. People from our planet only like to eat very large adults, so you don't have to worry for now.
What? What the fuck?
And that's it. That's how the book ends. We get this weird secondary plot twist that the aliens eat people, fat people specifically, or tall people depending on what version you read, which, what is going on? What happened? We're going to get into the conclusion now so I can get my thoughts out. In conclusion, R.L. Stine definitely didn't write Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. There are way too many clever jokes, and the characters are way more fleshed out than usual. They still aren't great, they're pretty annoying, but at least they have distinct personalities from each other. The protagonists in previous Goosebumps books I've read might as well have been cardboard cutouts. It could have been anyone in those books. These characters at least had some personality. The writing was a lot more fun and descriptive in this book, and there were some genuinely spooky scenes involving the pumpkin people. There was also no cat vor at all. Nobody got vored by a cat, so maybe R.L. Stine did not write this. However, he could have, because the absolutely out-of-pocket plot twist with the aliens absolutely killed this book for me. It ruined everything good it previously set up and reminded me why I have such a love-hate relationship with Goosebumps books. Some of the twists are so bad or wacky that they're hilarious, but to me this one is just bad. It completely came out of nowhere, there was no foreshadowing, and as I said before, it makes no sense with Drew's narrative. It was told from her point of view, and she was definitely scared, but that's not how she would have reacted given she knew this was all part of the plan. It makes absolutely no sense. I really enjoyed this book before that happened, and it's a shame that the Halloween special had to end on a low note, but hopefully we'll have better luck next time. Stay spooky!